I'll be handing off to Senator Cortez Masto when I'm finished up as well. So, Mr. Chairman, good to have you here today. When I am back in Montana, the number one issue I hear, certainly across the state, is the high cost of gas, the high cost of groceries, and overall how their paychecks are shrinking because of inflation. It's a crushing blow. It has real-life impacts. It's a top-of-mind issue for Montanans. It's also important to note the devastating impact it's going to have on our nation's economic future. In fact, in October of last year, I sent a letter to Congressional Budget Office Director Swagel regarding the impact that high inflation and the elevated interest rates would have on the cost of servicing the federal debt. His response painted a less than rosy picture, but then we got the CBO's updated 10-year baseline forecast in February, and it confirmed the truly dire situation that we find ourselves in. Driven by interest payments on the debt, the CBO now projects that cumulative deficits during the 10-year window, and I recognize where deficits come from. It's irresponsible spending here in Washington, but the cumulative deficits during the 10-year window will exceed $20 trillion, the cumulative deficits, not talking the debt, because it's going to grow the total federal debt to more than $51 trillion by 2033. Now, 2033 used to sound like a long ways away. We're 10 years away. 10 years goes by very, very quickly. Within 5 years, we're going to spend more on annual interest on the national debt than we spend on national defense. You think about that for a moment. And these are coming out of the CBO. These absolutely shocking, but quite frankly, predictable projections go back to a debate we vigorously had here in the banking community. I remember when Lawrence Summers, of course, the former Secretary of Treasury under President Clinton, economic advisor to President Obama, he warned us. He said, he was practically warning my colleagues across the aisle, says you can't move forward with these purely partisan, at that time a $1.9 trillion spending extravaganza. We had $1 trillion of unspent COVID money in December of 2020. And that passed on a purely partisan vote. We said it's going to start to ignite the inflation fires. So I certainly hope the president's budget, which we expect to see later this week, will propose pro-growth policies that can get us out of this mess. And I would argue almost an existential crisis as we look at what's going to come at us here, of course, in the next 10 years with debt and service on that debt. Unfortunately, as the president said in the State of the Union address, the president said he's going to raise taxes. That's a recipe for disaster. It's going to crush productivity, discourage investment, stifle economic growth even further. I want to turn to my questions now, Chairman Powell. You're raising interest rates to combat the inflation we've seen in the economy over the past few years. Is that correct?
Yes.
And although this is the domain of Treasury, a higher Fed's fund rate will mean higher borrowing costs. Is that correct?
Yes, all else equal.
So I just want to connect the dots here around inflation was sparked. One of the big reasons was massive spending here in Washington. And now we're going to be bearing the challenges with higher debt service over the course of the next several years, where we're going to see debt service exceeding defense spending, which is we see the threats of China, threats around the world. I think it's very, very concerning. Now, as a grandfather of 4, soon to be 5 grandchildren, this is things you think about more and more as you look forward. I want to change here and talk about American energy. When the war in Ukraine broke out, many feared that Russia would cut off natural gas exports and cause energy inflation to spike. Prices didn't spike as much as anticipated, due in large part to the fact that American companies stepped up to the plate. As of late last year, the European Union now receives more liquefied natural gas from the United States producers than it does from Russian producers. And that's a good thing for the world to see more U.S.-produced energy. Chairman Powell, do you believe that European and American inflation would have been manageable if not for American energy producers?
I certainly think that particularly our natural gas assets have helped Europe make the transition.
Any sense of how much worse the global energy picture would be if you would imagine a world where we're not producing and shipping energy to other countries?
It'd be hard to estimate.
Probably worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been clearly Europe has managed better than expected, and a part of that story is just U.S. energy experts. Also, the winter wasn't as bad, and the Germans made some good decisions.
Yeah, we made some prayers that says we need to pray for a warm winter for Europe, and I think they got one, which was something that's been helpful. I'm out of time here. I'm gonna